Walking away meant death. Staying meant becoming someone you'd never forgive. They survived the mountains, but the mountains never left them. Andes flight survivors, frozen, forgotten, forced to survive where breaking is not an option. They didn't know this was the last normal moment of their lives. The morning sun in Montevideo was gentle, almost forgiving. As the young men of the Old Christians Club rugby team boarded the Fairchild FH 227D, their laughter was loud, careless, echoing down the tarmac. They were boys in men's bodies, full of jokes and bravado, ribbing each other about girlfriends, about the game ahead, about the adventure of flying over the Andes. Some of them had never left Uruguay before. Some had never seen snow. They passed sandwiches, shared stories, and pressed their faces to the windows, watching the city shrink beneath them as the plane lifted off. Inside the cabin, the world was small and safe. A mother held her son's hand, her thumb tracing circles on his knuckles. A player leaned back, eyes closed, dreaming of the match in Santiago. Someone sang softly, off-key, and the others joined in, their voices rising above the hum of the engines. The future was a promise, not a threat. No one thought about death. Not really. Not at that age. In the cockpit, the pilots scanned their instruments. The weather was changing. Clouds gathered over the mountains, thick and impenetrable. The radio crackled with warnings, but the pressure to deliver the team was real. They decided to go. The plane banked west, engines roaring, and the Andes rose ahead, a wall of white and stone, ancient and indifferent. The boys watched the mountains approach, their faces pressed to the glass. The world outside was a blur of clouds and snow, the sun glinting off endless peaks. They joked about the thin air, about the way the world looked from above. They didn't know that the pilots, navigating by dead reckoning, had made a fatal error. They believed they were further west than they were. They began their descent too soon. The engines changed pitch. The cabin tilted. A few heads turned, curious but unconcerned. The pilots peered into the whiteout, searching for a break in the clouds. There was none. Suddenly, the world lurched. The plane shuddered. A scream, sharp, animal cut through the laughter. The left wing clipped a ridge, shearing off in a spray of metal and snow. The fuselage spun, slamming into the mountainside. Windows exploded inward. Luggage became shrapnel. Bodies were thrown against seats, against each other, against the unyielding skin of the plane. Time slowed. Faces contorted in terror. Hands reached for anything, anyone. The sound of tearing metal, of bones breaking, of prayers whispered and lost, filled the air. The tail ripped away, vanishing into the void. The nose plowed through snow, coming to rest in a silent, frozen world. For a moment, there was only silence. Then, the survivors began to move. Groans, sobs, the sound of someone calling for their mother. The cold was immediate, shocking. It seeped into bones, into thoughts, into hope. Blood stained the snow. The dead were everywhere, some still strapped to their seats, eyes open, staring at nothing. They counted the living. Some were missing, some were dead, some were dying. This was the moment where survival stopped feeling human. They gathered what they could: blankets, seat cushions, anything to hold back the cold. The injured moaned, their wounds raw and untreated. The air was thin, every breath a struggle. Night fell quickly in the mountains, and with it came a darkness so complete it felt like the end of the world. They huddled together, sharing what little warmth they had. The dead were left outside, their bodies already stiffening in the cold. No one spoke of rescue. Not yet, not out loud. But in the silence, the truth began to settle in. They were alone. The mountains stretched in every direction, endless and indifferent. There was no path, no road, no sign of civilization. Only snow, rock, and the wreckage of what used to be their lives. A boy stood at the edge of the wreckage, staring out at the white void. His breath fogged in the air. Behind him, the others moved like ghosts, tending to the wounded, searching for anything that might help them survive. He knew, in a way that was deeper than words, that no one was coming. Not tonight, maybe not ever. They didn't know this was the last normal moment of their lives. The wind rose, the cold deepened. The survivors, huddled in the broken shell of the plane, stared into the darkness, waiting for a dawn that might never come. The cold was not just a temperature. It was a presence, a living thing that crept into the fuselage and settled in their bones. The first night was a lesson in what the body could endure and what it could not. The survivors pressed together, shivering, their breath rising in pale clouds. The wind howled through the broken seams of the plane, carrying with it the scent of blood and fuel, and something else, something that felt like the end of hope. Morning came, but it brought no warmth. The sun was a pale, distant thing, barely touching the endless white that surrounded them. The mountains were everywhere, jagged and silent, their peaks lost in the clouds. There was no sign of life, no movement, nothing but the wreckage and the bodies. Some of the dead were easy to find. They lay sprawled in the snow, their faces frozen in expressions of terror or peace. Others were missing, torn from the fuselage during the crash, their bodies hidden somewhere in the vast, indifferent wilderness. The living moved among them, numb and silent, checking for signs of breath, for a pulse, for anything that might mean someone could be saved. Most of the time, there was nothing. The injuries were brutal. Broken legs, shattered arms, deep gashes that would not stop bleeding. Nando Parado's skull was fractured. He lay unconscious, his breathing shallow and ragged. Others moaned in pain, their bodies twisted in unnatural ways. There were no doctors, no medicine, no way to set bones or clean wounds. They did what they could with what they had: strips of clothing for bandages, snow for water, hope for anesthesia. Food was a memory. The few chocolate bars and bottles of wine that survived the crash were rationed, divided into pieces so small they barely registered on the tongue. Hunger was a dull ache at first, then a sharp, insistent pain. They searched the wreckage for anything edible: crackers, peanuts, toothpaste, even the leather from suitcases. Nothing lasted long. The days blurred together. Time lost its meaning. The sun rose and set, but the cold never left. At night, the temperature dropped so low that the air itself seemed to freeze. They huddled together, their bodies pressed so close that they could feel each other's hearts beating, slow and desperate. Sleep was a luxury, interrupted by shivers, by nightmares, by the sound of someone crying in the dark. Death was not dramatic. It was slow, quiet, and relentless. Some died from their injuries, slipping away in the night. Others simply stopped moving, their bodies giving up the fight. The living watched as their friends, their brothers, their teammates faded into silence. There was no dignity in it, no comfort, only the knowledge that each death made the group smaller, the odds worse, the cold deeper. They tried to keep track of the days, scratching marks into the metal of the fuselage. 10, then 12, then 15. Each mark was a reminder that they were still alive and that the world had not yet come for them. The radio was their only connection to hope. They took turns listening, straining to hear any sign of rescue. At first, there were reports of a missing plane, of search parties combing the mountains. The survivors imagined helicopters, search dogs, men in bright jackets calling their names. They told each other that help was coming, that they just had to hold on a little longer. But the days passed, and the voices on the radio grew fainter. The search was hampered by bad weather, by the vastness of the Andes, by the simple fact that no one knew exactly where to look. The survivors listened as the search was called off, as the world moved on, as their story faded into static. The realization came slowly, like the cold. No one was coming. Not today, not tomorrow, not ever. The mountains were too high, the snow too deep, the world too far away. They were alone, truly alone, in a place that did not care if they lived or died. Some tried to pray. Others cursed God, cursed fate, cursed the pilots, cursed themselves. Most just sat in silence, staring at the mountains, at the bodies, at the empty sky. Waiting was no longer survival. Waiting was death. The days grew shorter. The nights grew colder. The food was gone. The dead outnumbered the living. The silence was absolute, broken only by the wind and the sound of teeth chattering in the dark. They waited, but hope was gone. Only the cold remained. Hunger is not just an emptiness. It is a force, a slow violence that hollows out the body and mind. In the beginning, it was a gnawing ache, something they could distract themselves from with talk, with memories, with the hope that rescue was just a day away. But as the days stretched into weeks, hunger became something else, a shadow that followed them, a whisper in the back of their minds, a pain that would not let them sleep. They tried everything. They scraped the last crumbs from the seat cushions, chewed on strips of leather, sucked on toothpaste, even tried to eat the cotton from the seats. Nothing worked. The body needs fuel, and there was none left. Their faces grew gaunt, their eyes sunken. The cold, once their greatest enemy, became a numbness that dulled the pain of starvation, but never erased it. The dead were everywhere. Some lay outside, half buried in snow, their bodies frozen in the positions they had died. Others were inside, covered with coats or blankets, their faces turned away. The living tried not to look at them, but it was impossible to forget they were there. The dead were a constant reminder of what waited for all of them. At first, they spoke of the dead with reverence. They said prayers, whispered names, tried to remember the sound of their voices. But as the days passed, the dead became something else, an unspoken presence, a question that no one wanted to ask. The conversations started quietly, in the dark, when the wind was howling and the hunger was at its worst. Someone would mention the bodies, not directly, but in a way that made it clear what they were thinking. "If we don't eat, we'll die," someone said. "There's nothing left." The words hung in the air, heavy and shameful. Most refused to even consider it. They were Catholic boys, raised on stories of saints and martyrs, taught that the body was sacred, that cannibalism was a sin beyond forgiveness. Some wept at the thought. Others grew angry, accusing those who brought it up of blasphemy, of madness. But the hunger did not care about faith or morality. It only cared about survival. The days grew colder. The nights grew longer. The bodies grew weaker. Some could no longer stand. Others drifted in and out of consciousness, their minds clouded by hunger and cold. The decision, once unthinkable, became inevitable. They gathered in the fuselage, their faces pale and drawn, their eyes hollow. Someone spoke, his voice shaking. "If we don't do this, we'll all die." They would want us to live. They would understand. There were tears, arguments, prayers. Some refused, vowing to die before crossing that line. Others sat in silence, unable to speak. The first cut was made in silence. No one watched. No one spoke. The flesh was frozen, pale, and unrecognizable. It did not look like food. It did not look like anything human. The first bite was taken with eyes closed, a prayer whispered under breath. The taste was nothing, the act everything. Some vomited, some wept, some sat in silence, staring at their hands as if they no longer recognized them. The guilt was immediate, crushing. They spoke of it in whispers, if at all. They told themselves it was not a choice, but a necessity. told themselves the dead would forgive them. They told themselves anything that would let them live with what they had done. But the line had been crossed, and there was no going back. Survival demanded a price no one was ready to pay. The days that followed were a blur of shame and relief. The hunger eased, but the guilt did not. Some found comfort in faith, telling themselves that God would understand. Others withdrew, unable to look at their friends, unable to look at themselves. The dead, once mourned, became something else, a source of life, a reason to keep going, a burden that would never be forgotten. They tried to ration what they had to make it last. They argued about who would eat, about how much, about what was fair. The cold and the hunger made them cruel, made them desperate. Fights broke out, friendships fractured, trust eroded. The mountains watched in silence, indifferent to their suffering. Some refused to eat, choosing death over what they saw as damnation. They grew weaker, quieter, until one day they simply did not wake up. The others watched them go, torn between pity and envy. The radio was silent now. The world had moved on. The survivors were alone, bound together by a secret that would haunt them for the rest of their lives. They had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. They had done what was necessary to survive. But survival had a cost, and it was more than any of them had ever imagined. The mountains were still there, endless and white, watching as the survivors became something less than human and something more. The cold was still there, the hunger, the silence. But now there was something else, a knowledge, a memory, a stain that would never wash away. They had survived another day. But at what price? The days after the unthinkable decision were not easier. The hunger was dulled, but the shame was sharp, and the cold was relentless. The survivors moved through the wreckage like ghosts, their faces gaunt, their eyes hollowed by things they could never say aloud. The mountains pressed in on all sides, silent and unmoved by their suffering. The world outside was gone, replaced by a white eternity that offered no comfort, no escape, and no forgiveness. They tried to keep a routine, to hold on to some fragment of the lives they had lost. They took turns watching for rescue, though no one truly believed it would come. They tended to the wounded, though most wounds could not be healed. They prayed, though their prayers felt small and lost in the vastness of the Andes. Then, one night, the mountain moved. It began with a sound, a low, distant rumble, like thunder trapped beneath the earth. The survivors barely had time to look up before the avalanche struck. Snow and ice crashed through the broken fuselage, filling the space with a suffocating, blinding white. The world became noise and pressure and darkness. Bodies were thrown against metal, buried beneath snow, crushed by the weight of the mountain itself. When the avalanche passed, silence returned, deeper than before. Those who survived clawed their way out, gasping for air, their hands numb and bleeding. Some did not move. Some would never move again. The dead were buried where they fell, their bodies lost beneath the snow, their names whispered in the dark. The survivors were trapped, sealed inside the fuselage by tons of snow. The air grew thin, heavy, with the scent of fear and death. Claustrophobia set in, a panic that clawed at their throats and made their hearts race. Some screamed, some prayed, some simply sat in silence, waiting for the end. Despair settled over them like a second skin. The avalanche had taken more than lives. It had taken hope. The group was smaller now, weaker, more broken than ever. The cold was worse, the hunger sharper, the silence absolute. They spoke less, moved less, thought less. Each day was a struggle to find a reason to keep breathing. Some began to prepare for death. They wrote letters to their families, scrawling words of love and apology on scraps of paper. They said their goodbyes without words, with a touch, a look, a shared memory. There was no drama, no heroism, only the quiet acceptance that the mountain would win in the end. But not everyone was ready to surrender. A few, their bodies wasted, but their minds still burning with the will to live, began to talk of escape. The idea was simple and impossible. Someone would have to cross the Andes on foot to find help, to bring rescue. It was madness. The mountains were endless, the cold lethal, the distance unknowable. But staying meant certain death. Walking meant a chance, however small. The decision was not made lightly. They argued, pleaded, wept. Who would go? Who would stay? The strongest volunteered, though strength was a relative thing now. They prepared as best they could, fashioning makeshift shoes from seat covers, gathering what little food remained, wrapping themselves in whatever clothing they could find. They said goodbye without words, knowing that most would not survive, that some would die alone in the snow, that the mountain would claim them one way or another. The night before the walk, the survivors huddled together, sharing warmth, sharing fear. There were no speeches, no promises, only the knowledge that this was the end of waiting. Some prayed for those who would leave. Some envied them. Some simply closed their eyes and tried to remember what it felt like to be warm, to be safe, to be human. When morning came, the chosen few stood at the edge of the wreckage, staring out at the endless white. Their breath hung in the air, their bodies trembling with cold and fear, and something like hope. The others watched them go, their faces blank, their eyes empty. They didn't know if walking meant rescue or just a slower death. The mountains watched, silent and eternal, as the survivors took their first steps into the unknown. The cold bit at their skin, the snow blinded them, the wind howled in their ears. Behind them, the wreckage grew smaller, the voices of the others faded, the past slipped away. There was no path, no map, no promise of salvation, only the endless white, the memory of what they had done to survive, knowledge that the mountain would not forgive or forget. The walk had begun. The waiting was over. The end, whatever it was out there in the snow. The first steps into the white were not steps of hope, but of necessity. The men who left the fuselage did not look back. There was nothing left to see, only the broken shell of the plane, the faces of those who would not walk, the memory of what they had done to survive. The snow was blinding, the cold a living thing that clawed at their skin and lungs. Every breath was a struggle, every movement a test of will. They had no map, no compass, no real sense of direction. The Andes stretched in every direction, a labyrinth of peaks and valleys, each one more unforgiving than the last. The men moved in silence, their bodies wrapped in rags and seat covers, their feet bound in makeshift shoes. Hunger gnawed at them, but it was a familiar pain now, something they had learned to live with. The real enemy was the cold, the exhaustion, the endlessness of the mountains. Each night, they huddled together for warmth, their bodies pressed close, their minds drifting between sleep and delirium. Dreams came in flashes: home, family, the taste of real food, the sound of laughter. But the dreams always ended the same way, with the wind howling, the cold pressing in, the knowledge that they might never see another living soul. The days blurred together. The sun rose and set, but the world never changed. White above, white below, white in every direction. Sometimes they found themselves walking in circles, their footprints the only sign that anyone had ever been there. Sometimes they stumbled and fell, too weak to rise, and the others would have to drag them to their feet, whispering words of encouragement that sounded hollow even to their own ears. They rationed what little they had: scraps of flesh, melted snow, the last shreds of hope. They spoke little, saving their strength for the climb. When they did speak, it was in whispers, as if afraid the mountains might hear and take offense. On the third day, one of them could go no further. He sat down in the snow, his eyes distant, his breath shallow. The others tried to lift him, to carry him, but he shook his head. "Go," he said. "Don't stop." They left him there, a small figure in the endless white, and kept walking. The climb grew steeper. The air thinned. Their bodies, already wasted by weeks of starvation, began to fail. Muscles cramped, lungs burned, vision blurred. Sometimes they saw things that weren't there: shapes in the snow, voices on the wind, the faces of the dead. But they kept moving, one step at a time, because stopping meant dying, and dying meant nothing. On the 9th day, they reached the top of a ridge and saw, for the first time, something that was not white. Far below, in the distance, was a valley, green, alive, impossibly real. Civilization. The sight was so shocking that they wept, their tears freezing on their cheeks. The descent was agony. Their bodies were broken, their minds frayed, but the promise of life pulled them forward, down the mountain, across rivers, through forests. They followed the sound of water, the tracks of animals, anything that might lead them to people. On the 11th day, they saw a man on horseback. At first, they thought he was a hallucination, another trick of the mind. But he was real. He stared at them wide-eyed, as if he had seen ghosts. They tried to speak, but their voices were weak, their words slurred. "Help," they managed. "Plane crash, friends," the man rode away, and for a moment they thought he had abandoned them. But he returned, bringing food, blankets, the promise of rescue. The men ate, and the taste of bread and cheese was almost too much to bear. They wept again, this time from relief. The rescue was not immediate. It took days for help to arrive, for the authorities to find the wreckage, for the survivors to be airlifted out of the mountains. When the helicopters came, the men who had stayed behind in the fuselage were almost unrecognizable, thin, wild-eyed, their skin stretched tight over bone. But they were alive. The world was waiting. News of the miracle of the Andes spread quickly. Reporters swarmed the survivors, cameras flashing, microphones thrust into their faces. At first, the questions were simple. How did you survive? What did you eat? What happened up there? But soon, the truth came out. The world recoiled. Headlines screamed about cannibalism, about the unspeakable acts committed in the mountains. Some called them heroes. Others called them monsters. The survivors tried to explain, but there were no words that could make anyone understand what it was like to starve, to freeze, to watch your friends die, to do what you had to do to live. The guilt was a weight they carried long after the rescue. Some found solace in faith, in the belief that God would forgive them. Others struggled, haunted by nightmares, by the memory of the taste, by the faces of the dead. They returned to their families, to their lives, but nothing was the same. The Andes had changed them, marked them, left scars that would never heal. Some of the survivors spoke about what happened. Others stayed silent, unable to relive the horror. They tried to move on, to find meaning in what they had endured, but the world would not let them forget. The questions never stopped. The judgment never faded. They survived the Andes, but the Andes never left them. Survival did not end with rescue. It became a new kind of struggle, a fight to live with what they had done, to find forgiveness, to reclaim their humanity. Some succeeded, others did not. In the end, the story of the Andes is not a story of heroism. It is a story of what happens when civilization disappears, when morality bends, when survival is all that remains. It is a story of pain, of loss, of the terrible things people do when there is no other choice. Survival doesn't ask if you're ready. It only asks if you're willing.